If today feels a little clearer, like something is starting to make sense, like certain actions or choices feel more natural than others, this isn't random. Something is beginning to stabilize. The movement from yesterday was not just exploration, it was testing. And now you're starting to see what holds. Not fully, not completely defined, but enough to notice the difference. You may find that some things feel easier today, more natural, more consistent, more aligned with how you want to move, while other things may feel less engaging, less connected, less worth your energy. And that contrast is what matters, because it shows you where alignment is forming. You're no longer just moving blindly, you're recognizing, seeing patterns, noticing what works, understanding what fits, without needing to force it. You may also notice that your decisions feel slightly stronger, not completely certain, but more confident than before, because they're no longer based on assumption, they're based on experience, on what you've already tested, on what you've already engaged with. And that creates a different kind of clarity, not theoretical, but practical. You may also feel less need to explore everything, less curiosity about options that don't feel aligned, and more focus on what already shows potential. That's the shift from testing everything to recognizing something. So if today feels a little clearer, a little more directed, like you're starting to understand what actually works for you, it's because alignment is beginning to show itself.
What you're experiencing today is not sudden clarity, it's feedback becoming visible. The movement you made yesterday, even if it felt small, even if it felt uncertain, created information. And today, that information begins to organize itself into patterns, into signals, into something you can recognize. That's why things feel clearer, not because everything is fully defined, but because you now have something real to respond to instead of just ideas. You may notice that certain actions feel easier to repeat. They require less effort, less questioning, less adjustment. That's not random. That's alignment, something matching your direction without resistance. At the same time, other actions may feel less stable, less consistent, less connected, requiring more effort to maintain. That's also information, showing you what doesn't hold as naturally. And this contrast is what creates clarity, because clarity is not just about knowing what works, it's also about seeing what doesn't. You may also notice that your awareness feels more focused today, less open to everything, and more tuned in to specific things. That's because your system is beginning to filter, based on experience, not assumption. It's recognizing patterns, keeping what aligns, and releasing what doesn't. And that filtering process is what strengthens direction. So what you're feeling today is not certainty, it's recognition, the moment where movement turns into understanding, where experience turns into clarity, and that clarity begins to guide you more naturally, without needing to force it.
This is where today becomes important, because now you're getting signals, clearer than before, more noticeable, easier to recognize. And the question is, what do you do with them? The first trap is ignoring what is obvious, because sometimes what works is simple. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel new. It doesn't feel like a big breakthrough, so it's easy to overlook, to assume it's not significant enough, to keep searching for something better, something more certain. But clarity doesn't always appear as something big. Sometimes it shows up as consistency, something that works again and again. And if you ignore that, you lose direction. The second trap is overcomplicating what is working, trying to improve it too quickly, adjusting it before it stabilizes, adding more, changing things, expanding too soon, because you assume you need to optimize everything immediately. But when something is working, it needs to hold first. It needs to stabilize before it can be expanded. Otherwise, you interrupt the very thing that was creating alignment. There's also a subtler pattern today. Doubt returning when things start to become clear. Questioning what feels aligned, not because it's wrong, but because it feels too simple, too easy. And that can create hesitation, pulling you away from what is already showing you direction. So the real calibration today is trust in recognition. Not blind trust, but observed trust, based on what you've experienced, based on what has already shown you that it works. You don't need to search for clarity today. You need to stay with it. Let it repeat. Let it stabilize. Let it become consistent. Because what makes today powerful is not discovering something new. It's recognizing something real and allowing it to guide you forward. So how do you work with this clarity without disrupting it? You stabilize it, not by expanding immediately, but by staying with what works. Because today is not about doing more, it's about confirming direction. Start by identifying one or two things that feel consistently aligned. Not everything, just what clearly holds. And once you have that, repeat it. Engage with it again. Approach it in the same way. Let it show you that it remains stable. Because repetition is what turns recognition into certainty. You can also reduce unnecessary changes. If something is working, don't adjust it yet. Don't optimize it immediately. Don't expand it too quickly. Let it hold first, because stability comes before growth. You may also find it helpful to limit your focus, not to restrict yourself, but to protect what is aligned. Because when your attention is divided, clarity weakens. And when clarity weakens, direction becomes less defined. So keep your energy where it already makes sense. You can also observe without interfering. Watch how things develop when you don't change them. See what continues to work without needing your constant adjustment. Because what is truly aligned doesn't need to be forced. It continues, naturally, consistently. And that consistency is what you're building today. So today, don't rush ahead. Don't expand too soon. Don't search for something else. Stay with what is already showing you that it works, because that's what becomes your direction. Let everything settle here. Not to slow your movement, but to strengthen it. Because today was not about discovering something new. It was about recognizing what already works. So take a breath, steady, controlled, unforced, and notice what remains when you stop searching for more. There's clarity here. Not loud, not dramatic, but consistent. And that consistency is what creates direction. Because what works once is a possibility, but what works repeatedly is alignment. So not everything needs your attention now. Not everything needs to be explored. Some things have already shown you enough. And when you stay with those things, they begin to stabilize. They become easier to trust, easier to build on, easier to follow. So as you move forward from here, keep returning to that. What has already shown you that it holds? What feels consistent even when you don't force it? Stay there. Let it repeat. Let it strengthen, because that's what becomes your path. Not something you chase, but something you recognize and continue. And when you do that, your movement becomes simpler, more direct, more aligned, more stable over time. So carry that with you, this ability to recognize what is already working and allow it to grow, without interruption, without overcomplication, without needing to constantly change it. And if this helped you feel more clear, even slightly, return to it as your direction continues to strengthen. And if you want to keep moving through these shifts with more awareness, more control, you can come back here, each day, not to search for direction, but to recognize it as it forms.